Hey folks, welcome to another Broken Meeple review, and today we're talking about one of the new Euro hotness games that's going around at the moment. It's flew under the radar for a few people, but then all of a sudden a few demos appeared at UK Games Expo and a couple of other conventions, and now suddenly upon its retail release it's getting a lot of buzz, and that is Coimbra from xperiahector Games. This is a new dice placement Euro game which seeks to do things a little bit differently from other dice placement games. It's hard to sort of tell what really to compare it to with the mechanics that are used in this, but we'll get more onto that later. So in Coimbra, the name of the game is obviously victory points.
Of course!
And to get those points, you are collecting cards. These cards have special abilities on them, depending on what type of card there is, whether they're council members, scholars, monks, that kind of thing. And they also level you up on influence tracks. There is an influence track for each colour of card, each one that can potentially get you a source of income, whether it's guards, money, or movement around the map, or just straight up victory points. As well as collecting these cards, there's also, as I mentioned, a map in the middle of the board where your pilgrim piece, which is essentially a little worker meeple, can travel around to different monasteries, which are basically bonus tiles. Some will get you points, some will just level you up the track, some get you free cards, some extra money, some extra income. You know, they do all sorts of different things, and they'll be randomized at the start of the game, and you won't use every single one. As well as this, at the end of a round, you are also able to go on voyages, which are 6 cards taken, again, at random from a stack, so you won't use them all every game. And if you can meet the cost of the card, then you effectively can get victory points at the end of the game based on a certain criteria. That all sounds relatively basic, however, the crux of the game is the use of dice. So we've seen games where dice are used as a worker placement mechanic. With this, it's a little bit different. You have 4 locations that you may place your dice, and you will place 3 every round. There is a pool of, I believe, it scales by player, and there are neutral dice tokens for less players, but let's say we're talking about a 4-player game here. You will roll a total of, I believe, 13 dice, 4 colours, 3 dice apiece, and 1 wild die that can be used for any of them. The 4 locations are set up at the start of each round. The top location, known as the castle, has several favour token tiles. These are effectively bonuses you'll get for the round, or as an immediate thing if you take the specific tile. I'm trying to think of a good example of one that compares to that, but I think that this is a mechanic that you tend to see in a lot of Euro games. The other 3 aspects of the city, the outer, the middle, and the inner city effectively, have a set of cards next to them. 4 cards each, all of different colours to represent the different people that those influence tracks are based on. Each of those cards has a unique special ability. Some of them are derivative of others, like one might level you up, one might get you free income, one might get you 2 income and 2 guards. They're based on similarities to each other, but there are a few differing cards throughout the game, such as gain victory points for this, or instantly use the power of another card. It's all essentially combo building. You can buy these cards, but the cost varies based on the die you placed. When you place the die in these locations, you effectively have to organise them in order based on what is the highest to the lowest dice, and the order of which is better depends on which one you do. I believe the favour, the castles one, requires you to go from low to high, whereas the other 3 require you to go high to low. The idea being that with the city ones, the high die is the one that's going to get to pick the card first. But the cost of every card is either coins or guards times the number on your die. So if you're picking first, you might have gone in with a 6, which means your card is going to cost you 6 coins or 6 guards. Whereas if you were willing to get your card a little bit later, then you would maybe only pay 2 guards or 2 coins. So you have to balance out whether you are paying lots for the card and getting first pick of it. The best example I can think to compare that to is something like Pillars of the Earth, where you drew a Master Builder pawn out of a bag, and if it was your colour, you either had to pay an increased amount of money to put it on the table first, or you left it till later. It's similar to how that works. And it doesn't stop there with the dice. The dice also represent what type of income you can trigger at the end of the round. You'll only get 3, so you can't get income for all 4 of the tracks, but you might have just nicked 3 purple dice, in which case you'll be able to constantly move your pilgrim around the map loads of times. but then you might spread it out, you might focus entirely on coins. It's entirely up to you, but the dice definitely do have a sort of much bigger emphasis on what you do with them. The game will continue for 4 rounds where these cards will refresh or the voyages will stay the same until you get to the very end of the game where there's a little bit of extra scoring, but again, most victory points wins. So we'll start with the aesthetics first. Coimbra is quite a colourful looking game. The artwork is kind of a weird cross between cartoony and almost kind of, it's kind of weird really. It's a very unique style to this card game. It's not one that I'm going to say it looks like amazing, but it is colourful, it is vibrant, it does stand out on the board, especially when you factor in the other components. The cards themselves are decent quality, the board is nice and big and thick, but what really sells it is the dice and the holders. The dice themselves may not look like much, but they're sturdy, they're decent quality dice, and of course they're multicoloured. But what I really like is the little castle tower holders for the dice. So whenever you've played a dice worker placement game, have you ever been in that situation where somebody goes, ugh, and suddenly all the dice have knocked off? You're trying to pick up your drink and you knock the die over and you can't remember what face it was. And then you get into arguments, oh, you're cheating, it was definitely a 2, now suddenly a 6. You get that? Can't happen with this game. You have these rigid tower holders. You have to literally force the die into these things. I mean, they're pretty sturdy. These, you could tip it upside down. It's not going to fall out anytime soon. And you use them to place the dice. Not only does this allow you to tell who owns which die, so you can see, oh yeah, that's the blue player's got that one, green's got that one, green's also got that one. Great. It also means that if you do nudge the table, you're not going to tip them over. I mean, you would literally have to have an earthquake happen in order to knock these things onto their side. Yeah, unlikely. If you're playing a game during an earthquake, seriously, what are you trying to do? But, I like the way these little holders are. They look great. Everybody comes around and comments on them. And, they do a good job functionally as well as aesthetically. So overall, looks-wise and components-wise, it's a decent production. I think the art style is going to be subjective with a few people. You kind of, I don't think you're going to love it, but I don't think you're going to hate it either. I'm kind of middle of the road with this style, but, I can't argue that the game itself is pretty colourful and has been produced to a decent standard. The insert is also designed to hold all the pieces in special cuppy holds, although it is kind of weird that there's a lot of space for the cards and the dice. There's no extra space for the tokens and that, but for some reason there's a lot of space for the cards and the dice. So maybe this is hinting future expansion content that they're expecting to fit in those. I mean, I'm all cool for that, but it'd be nice if they kind of mentioned why that was, rather than just leaving this random bit of space there. But like I say, that's a minor thing, Hopefully that just simply means you're going to get an expansion down the line and all will be well. Now, the aesthetics are not all pleasing. There are some graphical design issues. Firstly, the iconography is pretty heavy in this game. There's very little text on the cards, I think, at all. In fact, I'm sort of thinking if there's any text at all. No, not really. It's pretty much the number and the iconography. So this game is just riddled with icons. And if you're not comfortable absorbing that kind of information, this is going to throw you off a bit. Secondly, the iconography is not particularly intuitive. Oh yeah, you can tell what a coin is and what a guard is and what a victory point is, but you are frequently, and I mean frequently, going to be checking that rulebook for the reference guides at the back to see what they all do. This really could have benefited from a reference aid for every player where it showed all the iconography, what they did, so nobody ever had to look at the rulebook. But I know that for the games I've played of this, I have had to have the rulebook on me on standby because chances are I've forgotten what an icon does, but certainly all the new players around the table have never seen the icons. So they're going to constantly ask, what does that do? And what's that card do? And sometimes the game kind of grinds a little bit forward as you're constantly explaining these icons. You'll get used to it in time if you're playing with the same group, but if you're teaching new players a lot, you're going to have to be prepared to either give them the rulebook so they can read it, if they're comfortable with that. I don't recommend doing that anyway, or being able to sort of read out a lot of the iconography to them. It's clear, so it's not like you're struggling to see like the pictures or anything. They're in decent places, it's big, you can easily see the icon, you won't miss a trick. but knowing what they do takes a little bit of experience with the game. The two best aspects of this game mechanically are the cards themselves and the way the dice are placed. The cards are basically lots of different abilities, and you can build combos by collecting different color sets or just, being tactical with your choices. That card's got a really cool ability, but it doesn't level me up on that influence track much. Maybe I should go for that one instead. That's going to propel me up the coin track, get me more income, but the ability is a little lackluster. You will see every card, but more on that later. With the dice, I really like the way that the dice value and the number are critically important to your decision making. A lot of games will sort of go, oh yeah, the dice color is the only thing that matters, or the value is the only thing that matters. Here, both matter. The closest thing I can think of to compare it to is probably Raja of the Ganges here behind me. That game required you to not only consider the colour of the dice, but also their value at times, sometimes together, particularly when you were buying the buildings. You needed to have the right colour of die, but then it also needed to be behind a value that you could afford it. Now with this, it's interesting. Both matter critically, but not at the same moment. Because when you place the die out, the colour is completely irrelevant. You are more concerned about its value. As I said, the top castle area requires you to have a low number in order to get first pick of the favourite tile. Whereas the city cards require you to have a high number to pick first, but you'll pay more for it. So I love that whole balance of, I really want that card. He's probably going to nick it, but it's going to cost me 6 if I want it. Oh, I don't like that at all. There's a lot of frustrating, in a good way, decision making like that. But once you're done with the whole, oh, I've got my card, yes, everybody's got that, then you do your income based on the colour. So suddenly, the fact that you've bought those cheap cards, did you get the colours you wanted? Because you'll look at the influence tracks and think, oh, I wish I'd picked a couple of orange ones, because I'm a bit short on money and the orange dice would have given me more money. But then, if you're leveling up really high on a particular influence track, then you're trying to get those dice. So as you take it in turns to draft the dice, which I do love, drafting dice is great, then you'll be thinking, well, it's the colour I want for that income, but what am I going to do with a 1? I don't really need a favourite tile. But maybe I don't really care what card I get in that row. Fine, I'll get a nice cheap card, whatever. So I love the way that you do decide a lot with these dice. This and Raja's are probably my favourite two versions of a game for dice placement alone. So certainly good marks for that there. Theme-wise, why even bother? This game has a big blurb at the start of the rulebook to say you are in Portugal and this is Coimbra, the university, and you're trying to influence all these people and trying to put a historical thematic spin on it. Don't try. You can't make this into a thematic game, Spiel.
No, you can't. Don't even try.
This is purely a Euro mechanical game. The pilgrim going round to the monasteries, it could be a drunkard going to the pub on a big pub crawl. You could literally make that the exact theme of that map. It would make no difference whatsoever. Whether you call the purple cards clerics or the grey cards council members, whatever. Call them something else. Call the green the poker players. Call the orange the darts players. You could replace this theme with anything. You quickly forget what Coimbra is or even where you are. It's hard to tell that you're even playing this game in Portugal if you know nothing about what Coimbra is. There's nothing on the map saying Lisbon or Barcelona or anything like that here. Is that Portugal? I don't know. Geography. But there's nothing here that says this is a thematic game. So know that going in. Stop trying to paste themes on these games, people, because this whole historical Euro theming of it is so and so year and it's this city and you're influencing all very important people. It's getting old. I'm getting tired of it. Just stop it, all right? The paths to victory are fairly plentiful in this game. I mean, you could focus on one of the particular tracks, you could focus on several, you could spend all your time going around that map, you could just focus on cards. You could just try and get all the voyage cards at the bottom. There's many different ways that you can play the game and try to win, which is good. That adds to replay value. However, the replay value is not as strong as you might think. Now, the voyage cards are pretty plentiful. There's quite a few of them and you only use 6. So the end game objectives will change. The influence tracks have their own sort of first, second and third place points, but they're randomized each game, so one might be worth 16, one might be worth 14. That's kind of it. The favour tiles, there's only 4 of them. You never see any new ones, which is a bit of a shame. It would have been nice if maybe there was 8 favour tiles and you used 4 in each game. That would have been cool. But the cards, you use every single card. And I know why they've done this, because in order to address game balance for victory conditions, you can't have a randomized set of cards because somebody might focus on a particular path and none of the cards come out that support it. So I can see why that has to happen, but just like in Lorenzo di Magnifico or whatever that game was, you had the same problem there. Yes, for balance you need all the cards to show up, and you never know when they're going to show up, but you will see every single card in every single game. So you won't get any major surprises with the cards unless you happen to deal out 12 of the same colour, which is highly, highly unlikely. And I've talked a bit about balance, and I must admit, I don't like to go too much on about balance in games, particularly as, even when reviewing a game, I've played this several times, but you kind of need a mathematical formula and computer to calculate true game balance. But I can foresee that this one is going to cause maybe the odd argument here or the odd debate among players. It has done with me even, particularly after the first couple of games where I was relatively new to it. The cards themselves and the monastery tiles do have some abilities where people are going to think that some are way more powerful than others. This is the Voyages of Marco Polo effect, where you get powers where they look so insane, so game-breaking, that people will think that X is more overpowered than Y. Now, with this Coimbra game, some of that has merit. I'm not going to say the game is fundamentally unbalanced or anything. No, that would be unfair. I'd probably need to play this another 20 times to find out. But there are some abilities that definitely have seen more use than others. 2 brilliant examples here, the monastery tiles. There is a tacked on scoring element at the end of this game, and I say tacked on because it must have been tacked on, where you can collect these little diplomas, these tiny little diploma symbols of different colours, and it's a set collection. Collect all 5 of a set, you get 12 points. If you collect less, you get less points. 12 points may sound like a lot, but really it isn't. You will easily lap the board of 100 points and then some. So 12 is not a huge game when some of these things are gaining you more than that just by one ability. And it's really hard to collect these diploma icons. If you're really fussed about collecting diploma icons, you're probably hemorrhaging points by not collecting decent abilities or not collecting the cards you need. Now, the 2 tiles I'm thinking of is that one of them scores your diplomas instantly. Okay, so maybe I'll get 6 to 10 points if I'm really lucky, but it's unlikely. Every time I've seen that tile come up, nobody's gone for it. Whereas there's another tile which scores a green victory point condition card and an influence track instantly. It scores both. And I've checked this, it scores both. That tile is ridiculous. In every single game I have played, if somebody has a green card, and to be honest, most people will have a green card, they are gunning for that tile every single time. Because that tile has regularly gained you somewhere in the region of like 20 plus points for one tile. Just get your pilgrim there, which is not difficult because there's plenty of ways to get your pilgrim to move around that map, and you get a swath of points. Way more than some of the other tiles do. Now, I'm not saying that tile is completely broken in comparison to others, but you're going to get occasions like that where you see a tile gain multiple people so many points, and you'll look at other ones and you'll go, that doesn't seem anywhere near as good, and it's the same tier. What gives? And some of the card abilities are like that. There are some card abilities where people can get loads of points from not putting in a huge amount of effort, and some cards where you think, whoopee, I got 2 coins and 2 guards. Big kind of whoop, it's so they kind of work into each other, and the influence costs and that, obviously a factor to bear in mind, but it's not that I want to call the game unbalanced at all, because I don't think it fundamentally is, but you would need to play this hundreds of times to figure that out. And like with Voyages of Marco Polo, you're going to get a lot of arguments down the line where people are thinking, oh, that power's way better, or that's a bit, that's insane, and any game that lends itself to that, kind of maybe needed to revisit that aspect a little, because it's going to sour the game if you've got people in the group who are likely to comment on such things. I mean, okay, I'm commenting on this in the review, but I'm doing this after the game's finished, in the review. I'm not during the game saying, oh, that's overpowered. No, that's bad. That's bad gaming. But certainly something to bear in mind with this. The time length is also a little bit long if you play this with the 4-player count. 2 to 3 players works actually pretty well. The game scales a little bit. It gives you these neutral die tokens which get rid of cards. They're reasonably easy to implement, so the game scales okay. 4 players can get quite cutthroat because there's only so many cards out there for you to get, but it does take a while to finish the game. 4 rounds doesn't sound like a lot, but a lot of your 4-player games will probably take you past the 2-hour mark. Not bad, but there's only so many decisions you're making in this game. Granted, they're each important, but think about it. You've got 4 rounds in the game. You only have 3 dice. You're technically only making 12 placements of dice in the game. You're triggering other combos like, moving the guy around the map and getting voyage cards and leveling up on tracks. But think about it. You're only using 12 dice. That's not a lot of actions. For a game that lasts over 2 hours, that's not a great ratio of what you're actually physically doing and the time it takes. Granted, you're going to be engaged thinking like, oh, should I take that die? Do I really need that income? But that's only going to take you so long. And even then, if you're playing in a 4-player game particularly, there's only so much you can forward plan because there's a high likelihood the die you want is going to get taken anyway. This is less of a problem in 2 or 3-player games. So that's why, again, broken record, yep, 3 players is definitely my sweet spot for this one. But 2 works fine, 4 is okay, just wish it wasn't quite as long. So that's all for Coimbra. Do I love it? No. Do I hate it? No, not even slightly. I mentioned things about balance and all that, but overall this is a really solid game. You have to accept that going into this, the theme makes no sense whatsoever, there's no point in it. But if you're going into this purely for a dice mechanical, sort of worker placement style game, then this is a really good solid one. The dice of what value you want for buying the cards versus the color you need for the income, it's very engaging, it's good decision making. Even though I wish that you did more than 12 of them during the course of a game. That is kind of a bit of a downside. You could be playing this for a good 2 hours and not performing a lot of actions, which is a little bit disconcerting. But aesthetically, it's very colourful, could use an improvement here or there on certain aspects, so, particularly with the iconography, but, overall, you will get used to it, and the rulebook's pretty clear. The rulebook's not too difficult to understand, and all the stuff is explained at the back, so if you're happy to read the rulebook for all the reference aids, it's there. You shouldn't have too much ambiguity with what the various cards and icons do. You're just going to have to accept you're going to have to check a lot. So, Coimbra, I think it's solid. Personally for me, probably about a 7. Yeah, it's a comfortable 7. I don't love it. It's not something that I'm going to try and bring to the table all the time. But I'm going to hang on to it. It's going to sit in the collection for a bit. See how often I bring it to the table in the future with, more knowledge of the game and the fact that it doesn't really have a theme to speak of, so it's going to require a bit more effort from me. But I really do like the dice. I do like the cards. A little expansion might help it, just to add a little bit more card variety, find a way to balance it so that you don't miss out on certain cards. But yeah, Coimbra's solid. I think a lot of Eurogamers are going to go nuts for it. I can see why. This is already becoming a favourite for many people, and for me, it's a good, solid game. Not perfect, but, most Euro games and most games in general aren't always perfect. Or even the best of games are never perfect. So, that's Coimbra. A decent 7 for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review video. Chances are this might be going live before Essen. If it does, I hope to see you at the convention. For now, regardless of whether you give a monkey's about what place you're in or what you're doing with these dice, just accept it's only a game and have fun. Take care. See you next time.
Don't even try.